By the summer of 1940, Britain stood on the edge of disaster. Nazi Germany had crushed Western Europe in weeks, and the British Army had barely escaped through the smoke and chaos of Dunkirk. Now the country waited for an invasion that could come any day. And behind every meeting table, one fear kept British planners awake at night. The infantry had no real way to stop a German tank. This was not a small problem. Only months earlier, German armored divisions had ripped through France, breaking lines that were supposed to hold for weeks. British soldiers watched tanks roll straight past their positions, while they held a weapon that was already outdated, the Boy's anti-tank rifle. It fired a large round, but against modern armor it might as well have been firing pebbles. At anything beyond point-blank range, the bullets simply bounced off. Reports from France were grim. In one account, men from the Royal Norfolk Regiment tried to stop tanks with homemade firebombs. It was brave, but hopeless. Everyone knew Britain needed something new, something a single soldier could carry, something powerful enough to kill a tank. But in 1940, Britain had nothing. The Americans were still working on the bazooka. The Germans were experimenting with the Panzerfaust. Britain had only fear, frustration, and a handful of inventors no one took seriously. Ideas did exist. Designs had been submitted. But the committees in London refused almost everything. Senior officers believed only a traditional gun, heavy, crew-served, and slow to move, could defeat armor. Anything else was dismissed as fantasy. One of the most promising ideas was rejected again and again. Its inventor was mocked, ignored, and told his weapon belonged in a carnival, not a war. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Blacker. Blacker was not a dreamer. He was a stubborn, practical artillery officer who had survived the First World War. In the late 1930s, he became obsessed with an idea most experts considered ridiculous: a spigot mortar. Instead of firing a shell down a barrel, his weapon launched a bomb off a steel rod, the propellant charge built into the bomb itself. It was simple. Too simple, in the eyes of traditional ordnance officers. No barrel. No rifling. No elegance. They dismissed it before even testing it. In 1940, Blacker built a version of his idea for home defense, the Blacker Bombard. It looked rough, almost homemade, and the War Office rejected it instantly, until the design reached Winston Churchill. The Prime Minister loved unconventional thinking and had already created a special weapons unit called MD-1, known informally as Churchill's Toy Shop. Once the Bombard reached his desk, production began almost overnight. By 1941, more than 18,000 were in the hands of the Home Guard. That success gave Blacker something he had never had before: credibility. If a crude spigot mortar could work for home defense, why not build a lighter, stronger version that could kill tanks? From this idea came the next step: an infantry anti-tank projector. The design would eventually be reshaped by Major Millis Jeffress of MD-1, but Blacker's concept was the heart of it. Still, even as development continued, internal memos showed how deep the resistance ran. Engineers questioned whether the weapon could ever fire fast enough to break armor. Officers doubted its safety. Many believed the whole project was a waste of time. But Blacker kept pushing. Because he believed that if Britain failed to arm its soldiers quickly, no amount of courage would stop the tanks that were already rolling across Europe. And that is where this part of the story ends, at the moment when one stubborn inventor fought not the Germans, but his own nation's doubts. What came next would change the battlefield forever. Yet while Blacker kept fighting the system, doubts inside the War Office only grew louder. Some reports warned that the firing method was too strange to trust in battle. Others called the entire design a pipe bomb, a phrase that appeared in more than one review. Early field tests did little to calm these fears. The first prototypes were unreliable, inaccurate, and sometimes refused to fire at all. During one trial in 1942, the weapon failed 3 times in a row, much to the satisfaction of everyone who wanted it cancelled. But Blacker and the team at MD-1 refused to quit. They fixed faults, strengthened components, and slowly proved that the design had real power. By late 1942, armor penetration trials showed results that no one could ignore. The shaped charge warhead, a technology rooted in the Monroe effect from the late 19th century, focused explosive energy into a thin jet of superheated metal. Instead of punching through armor with speed, it burned through using pressure so extreme that steel behaved almost like liquid. Suddenly, the weapon that critics mocked could pierce heavy armor the boys' rifle could never touch. In early 1943, the infantry anti-tank projector entered British service. The doubters were still there, but they could no longer stop it. Frontline soldiers would soon form their own mixed opinions about this new device. Half fear, half respect. To understand why the weapon worked, you had to forget everything you knew about guns. It had no barrel, no rifling, and no high-velocity round. Inside its 3-foot steel tube sat a powerful spring and a spigot rod. A 3-pound bomb rested in a shallow tray at the front. When the trigger was pulled, the spring slammed the spigot into the bomb's tail, igniting the propellant. The blast launched the bomb forward and forced the spigot backwards, resetting the spring for the next shot. The real magic happened inside the warhead. The copper-lined cone collapsed inward on impact, creating a jet of metal moving at incredible speed, enough to punch through roughly 100 millimeters of armor under ideal conditions. Any German tank of the time could be destroyed if the shot landed properly. But accuracy was the price. Though the bomb could be lobbed hundreds of yards for general bombardment, effective anti-tank range was under 100 yards. 50 yards was ideal. Killing a tank meant letting it roll dangerously close. The recoil system, however, surprised everyone. Because the spring absorbed most of the blast, the weapon could be fired from inside houses or narrow alleys without the deadly backblast of a bazooka. For urban fighting, this was a major advantage. Weight, however, was a constant headache. The weapon itself weighed 32 pounds, and each bomb added another 3. A soldier with 3 shots carried more than 40 pounds of awkward, front-heavy equipment. Training exposed every flaw. Cocking the weapon required enormous effort, nearly 200 pounds of force. Many soldiers simply could not compress the spring alone. Manual suggested alternate methods, 2 men working together, bracing the weapon against a wall, or using body weight instead of strength. None of these were fast, which was a serious problem when tanks were closing the distance. Firing positions felt unnatural. Whether prone, kneeling, or standing, the weight distribution made steady aim difficult. Training results reflected this challenge. A 1944 study showed that only 38% of trainees could reliably hit a tank-sized target at 50 yards under controlled conditions. At 100 yards, accuracy dropped below 20%. Bad weather added another layer of risk, especially since the propellant cartridges reacted poorly to moisture. Yet everything changed when the weapon met real German armor. In Sicily, in the summer of 1943, crews reported confirmed kills against tanks that infantry had once viewed as unstoppable. Soldiers who had cursed the weapon in training began to rethink their opinions as they watched enemy armor burning on the battlefield. And as soon as the weapon proved itself in Sicily, something else changed, something far more important than engineering. For the first time, British infantry facing tanks felt they had a real chance to fight back. Before this, their choices had been grim: run or die. Now a 2-man PAT team could turn any street corner or hedgerow into an ambush point that German tank crews had to respect. Morale shifted almost overnight. The infantry no longer felt helpless. Training programs evolved as battlefield experience grew. Instructors stopped relying on textbook drills and began teaching what actually worked in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. Soldiers learned to let tanks roll dangerously close before firing, to aim for the side or rear armor, and to trust that courage would matter more than perfect aim. The weapon was still heavy, awkward, and frustrating, but it was also deadly. Then came September 1944 and an Allied plan so daring that even its creators privately doubted it. Field Marshal Montgomery convinced the High Command to launch Operation Market Garden, a massive airborne assault across the Netherlands, aimed at capturing a chain of bridges that would open a direct road into Germany's industrial heartland. The last bridge, spanning the lower Rhine at Arnhem, was the key. Take it, and the war might be over within months. Fail, and disaster would follow. British 1st Airborne Division received the most difficult assignment: seize Arnhem Bridge and hold it until armored forces could fight their way north. Intelligence claimed only weak German units were near Arnhem. In reality, 2 SS Panzer divisions, the 9th and 10th, were resting and refitting there, creating one of the strongest armored concentrations in Western Europe. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost and his 2nd Parachute Battalion were tasked with capturing the bridge itself. Frost, hardened by North Africa and Sicily, understood the stakes the moment his men landed 8 miles from their goal on the afternoon of September 17th. They pushed through residential streets, many of which would soon turn into battlegrounds. Only Frost's battalion made it to the northern end of the bridge. The rest were stalled by fierce German counterattacks across Arnhem's western suburbs. By nightfall, Frost held the northern ramp with roughly 740 men, a mix of paratroopers and scattered units who had fought their way through. The southern end remained in German hands. Worse, Frost had no anti-tank guns. The airborne drop had prioritized other supplies, and nothing heavy had arrived. What he did have were PIATs, those awkward, much-mocked weapons his men had dragged across 8 miles of Dutch streets. Critics had called them pipe bombs. Now they would be the only line of defense against German armor. The Germans struck quickly. In the early morning of September 18th, an armored column tried to rush across the bridge. Frost's men held their fire until the vehicles reached the northern ramp, then unleashed everything they had. The lead vehicles exploded into flames, blocking the bridge and halting the attack, but it was clear the Germans were only getting started. Commanders soon gathered heavier forces, self-propelled guns, armored cars, and Tigers from the elite 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion. These 60-ton tanks, nearly immune to conventional infantry weapons, now rolled toward Frost's thin perimeter. The British dug into surrounding buildings, rationed ammunition, and positioned PIAT teams on upper floors with narrow, deadly fields of fire. The expected rescue column from XXX Corps was still far away. The battle ahead would determine whether the derided PIAT could deliver on its promise. German attacks came in relentless waves. Tank commanders, accustomed to watching infantry scatter, met something entirely different here: paratroopers who refused to run. The tight urban terrain erased the Tigers' advantages. Their long guns were too slow to track fleeting targets. Crews who opened their hatches for visibility risked being shot by British marksmen. And with streets choked by rubble and burning wreckage, German armor could advance only through predictable corridors, perfect killing zones. PIAT teams fired from shattered windows, cellar openings, and garden walls. Ranges were so close that operators could sometimes hear voices inside the tanks. One team in a house overlooking Utrechtszug reportedly destroyed 2 Tigers in minutes, firing through a bedroom window as the tanks tried to maneuver past burning vehicles. The tactic was simple but terrifying. Let the tank fill the site entirely, aim for the thin armor on the side or rear, fire, then relocate before German infantry poured fire into the position. The shaped charge warheads performed exactly as physics predicted. They cut through armor, ignited fuel or ammunition, and left even the mighty Tigers burning. By the end of the fighting, 7 Tigers were confirmed destroyed around the bridge, an outcome that shocked German commanders. Captured reports later revealed their disbelief that lightly equipped paratroopers could inflict such losses. But success came at a cost. Every PIAT round fired was one that could not be replaced. Frost's quartermaster issued ammunition only to confirmed target positions, refusing to waste a single shot. By the second day, most PIAT teams were down to only a few bombs each. Every engagement became a calculated risk against overwhelming odds. As the fighting entered its final hours, the defenders knew the bridge could not be held much longer, yet their actions had already reshaped how infantry anti-tank warfare was understood. The improvised pipe bomb that so many experts had dismissed as unworkable had now destroyed 7 Tiger tanks and halted repeated armored thrusts. For all the confusion of combat records, what mattered was the renewed confidence it gave to ordinary soldiers. Units that once viewed armor as unstoppable now understood they possessed a genuine means of resistance. The PIAT's sudden success forced armies on both sides to reassess long-held assumptions. Its shaped charge warhead and recoilless launch method became reference points for post-war designers in the United States and Germany, forming the conceptual basis of modern infantry anti-armor weapons. What Frost's men demonstrated at Arnhem was that well-positioned and determined troops could impose a punitive cost on armored formations, even when outnumbered and cut off. The individuals behind the weapon also lived out the consequences of that transformation. Stuart Blacker, whose design had been ridiculed through trials and committees, received formal honors but never the senior command posts others believed he deserved. Still, he lived long enough to see the weapon vindicated by the events at Arnhem. Frost himself survived captivity despite severe wounds, returned to active duty, and eventually rose to Major General. In 1977, the Arnhem Bridge was renamed in his honor, a permanent acknowledgement of the men who had held it against impossible odds. Operation Market Garden ultimately failed to achieve its strategic aims, yet the fighting at Arnhem revealed a deeper truth. Determined infantry, given the right tools and leadership, could impose unexpected limits on armor. German commanders who had come to rely on the dominance of their tanks discovered that infantry opposition had entered a new era. The PIAT story became a case study in military innovation, how ideas once mocked in committee rooms could, in the heat of battle, prove the experts wrong. The soldiers who used it cared only that it stopped the machines advancing toward them. And in those desperate streets, the much-derided pipe bomb did exactly that.